Hello, Emily. I don't know if you can hear us. Hello? Testing microphone. You should be able to hear us. Emily, are you there? Hmm. Okay. Yeah, but she should still be able to hear me. Bring it back over so I can see what I'm doing. Testing 1, 2, 3.
So I can't hear anybody. I cannot hear anybody. All I see is the room.
Check 1, 2, 3. I mean, it's coming in. I don't know why she's not hearing me.
If you can hear me, can you wave at me from that little window? Okay, you can hear me. Good.
Yeah. Can you hear us? I'm taking that as a no. I don't think she's seeing the chat. Let me try to switch something here.
I still can't
Hello?
hear you all.
Okay. I have switched to a different microphone. Can you hear me now? Check 1, 2, 3. Hello? Hello?
Oh, I got you.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Turned up.
Excellent.
Hold on now. I'm gonna switch back to my wireless.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear us now on this?
Yes.
Awesome. Awesome. We can see you. Are you also going to send like a presentation over? Do you want to test that out?
Yes. Here,
Okay.
Let me start that. Okay. Okay, can you see that?
Yes, I can. I'm going to move this over so everybody else out in the auditorium can see it.
Okay. And it's changing.
Is that it? No. What does that say? Chat window. It's the chat. That's Is there any audio in your presentation that we might need to test or?
No, there is not.
Okay, so it's just images.
Yes.
Great.
So you can see when I flip through here.
Yep, we're getting that.
Great.
Okay, I'm Kyle, by the way. I'm with the IT staff, and
Hi,
I'm here with
Kyle.
Chad. I think you've probably been
Jen.
communicating with Chad.
Hello, Emily.
Hello.
I'm going to take the microphone down to Christine so she can meet you too.
All right. So there's actually going to be a live audience as well.
Hi, Emily.
Hi.
Nice to see you again.
So I didn't realize there was actually going to be a live audience as well.
Yeah. I think we're going to
That-
wait a few
That
more
Zoom
minutes.
link that, oh, sorry. That Zoom link that you had on Facebook, though, is for people that just want to call in, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So we
great.
probably will have some people joining us through Zoom as well.
We'll wait another 5 or 6 minutes.
Okay.
She's after your introduction. You don't have to go up there first.
Welcome to the MSSU Department of Art and Design's Visiting Artists Lecture Series, sponsored by the Katherine L. Hyde Charitable Trust and Institute of International Studies. Emily Hanako Momohara's work centers around issues of heritage, multiculturalism, immigration, and social justice. Momohara has exhibited nationally and internationally and has been a visiting artist at several residency programs. She created socially driven billboards for Four Freedoms and United Photo Industries. She lives and works in Cincinnati, where she is Associate Professor of Art at the Art Academy of Cincinnati and heads the photography major. Between 1999 and 2014, Emily Hanako Momohara traveled to several of the former sites of incarceration, photographing the visual remains of the wartime imprisonment infrastructure, concrete steps, barbed wire fences, barrack-style cots, disintegrating wood posts, and the desolate exposed desert landscapes where people were subjected to extreme heat and cold. Reviewing these photographs in light of the present moment, Momohara rephotographed her original images, reframing and reflecting on the parallels between the wartime incarceration of Japanese Americans and the incarceration of migrants and the separation of families at the US-Mexico border. The artist explains, quote, "This is only relevant if we do something with it. If we don't, then it is in the past. It is only relevant if we can look at it and see that these mistakes were made before and we don't need to make them again," end quote. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you very much. I see it's a packed house here tonight. And welcome to you folks online too. Thank you, Christine, for inviting me. And I'm gonna start out here and back up and just talk about some of the inspiration for the projects that I'm going to share with you tonight. And I hope those of you who are there in person have gotten to see the show. The pictures look great, so I'm really excited. All right. Yeah. So this is me with my great-grandmothers, and most folks I know don't get to have their great-grandmothers in their lives, but I was very fortunate to be able to do that. On the left is Hanako Doi, who I am named after. She is my grandmother's mother, my paternal grandmother's mother, and on the right is Tsuru Momohara, my paternal grandfather's mother. And both of these ladies were immigrants from Japan. My grandma Doi was from the mainland of Japan, and Grandma Momohara was from Okinawa. So their lives as this kind of blended culture that they lived were really influential in the work that I do. And today I'm going to talk about some of the experiences that happened to the family that was on the Doi side of the family. Before we get there, I have always been a political person or interested in social issues. This is from the first grade. Many of you remember these kinds of papers, right, where you had to practice your writing. And so I chose to write about Ronald Reagan and that the hostages were free. Clearly here my proportions are not so great. I don't know if you can actually see my cursor here, but it looks like the Great Lakes are spanning the entire country. And the United States is an island, but I was interested in what was happening to other people in the world and within our politics. As an adult, I was able to travel to Japan as an exchange student, and this is me on the second row up, the third person in. And I realized once I got there that I was nothing like the Japanese students that were my peers. My family had been through an incarceration experience, which was very pivotal in our trajectory, and it took us away from the traditions of Japan and keeping up with contemporary Japanese society. So it led me to investigate the World War II incarceration. And this is an image of my grandmother. She was 16 when Japanese Americans were incarcerated. And she graduated from high school in one of these camps. Now, there were 10 camps total throughout the United States. The one that my family was at was called Minidoka, and it was in southern Idaho, just north of Twin Falls, Idaho. So she was uprooted, if you can imagine. I know that there's students on the line here, you know, you're at 16 years old, you're in high school, and you're uprooted and you're put into one of these incarceration camps. You share a room with your entire family, your siblings and your parents. And there's no privacy. You eat in a mess hall, you wait in line to eat, you wait in line to do laundry. You wait in line for everything. And this was the life that my grandmother found herself in. So I went to several of the camps. I started going to the camps in 1999. And this image here is from Minidoka, and it's where the dump was. And when folks were eventually let out, so the incarceration started in 1942. I should say the incarceration of US citizens started in 1942. There was a lot of folks who were rounded up prior to that, right after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, who were not citizens. But the citizens and their parents, anyone who was of Japanese ancestry, were incarcerated in 1942, and they presumably could have stayed there until 1945, and in some late cases, 1946. So these dumps were places that anything that was accrued during those 3 to 4 years that a family might have purchased, they had catalogs, you know, instead of Amazon, they had the Sears Roebuck's catalog, and they would purchase things and have it mailed to them. So, you know, anything that they might have bought to spruce up their little barrack room, or like these dishes, a lot of that was just thrown out when they were able to leave. And so I found myself seeing these little remnants, like whose cup was that? Could it possibly have been my family's cup? You know, just really thinking about the identity and the experience, and, you know, who was there and what was their life like. There's also lots of remnants of the buildings, and the landscape is kind of scarred with these remnants that are present. This is still Minidoka. This is in the area where the staff housing and warehouses would have been. This one I call Foundation, and it was actually taken in 2001. I call it that because it really reminds me of my grandma. Not only is it a foundation, literally, but metaphorically, she really went on to be the foundation for our family, coming out of this experience, not talking about the camps at all, actually, and really just trying to Americanize the family as much as possible. My father grew up playing baseball and, you know, chewing bubble gum and all of these all American types of activities. This image here is from Heart Mountain. This is a piece of barbed wire that's still, or was still up in 2003 when I visited Hyde Mountain. And, you know, I'm just really interested in this kind of layers of information. So here we have a piece of barbed wire that's actually broken in one case. And then in the background, we have a structure that was part of the incarceration camp. And then behind that, we have this mountain, Heart Mountain, that has, a ton of history with Native Americans, with settlers, and then this incarceration experience added onto that layering. This image is from 2014, actually. Topaz is the last of the camps that I visited. And here you can see some of the remnants that are left there on the ground. And this body of work in 2019, 21C Museum Hotels came to me and said, I really want to show this work. It's important because of what's going on in our country right now with immigration and race-based incarceration. And, can we show this work? And I thought, oh man, I wouldn't do it the same way. So the work that's in your gallery right now is not, it looks very similar to those images, but they're not exactly those images. I decided that I could revisit those photographs that I took 1999 through 2014, but I probably wouldn't photograph them the same way, especially the early ones, as I had done. And so it became, the process became a conceptual process as well as being about those places. So the work ended up becoming a body of work called Detention Past. And what I did was I re-photographed my photographs. So here, this image is stairs. It was taken at Manzanar, which is a camp that's in in the desert in California. And here we have some stairs that probably went up to a barrack of one of the staff folks or maybe an office. The incarcerees did not have sidewalks or stairs like that. So, so we assume it was for someone that worked there. But anyway, I was photographing and I thought that re-photographing these images would add this layer of contemporary, context. And it would also do some things to the image that showed the kind of generations of imagery that were made. So if you think about having the place itself, and then you take a photo of that. So you have a negative and you make a print. And then I made another negative of that print and I scanned it. And then I made another print. So there's all these different generations of this same image of that place. And what this is called in photographic language is called generational loss, because every time you reproduce something, it loses detail, it loses contrast. So you don't see what's happening in the shadows or in the highlights as much. So this idea of generational loss, not only being a symbolic kind of way to address that, but also this idea of all of these different steps of removal felt more contemporary to me, because we are doing some of the same things. We are separating families, we're incarcerating children, we are doing many of these things today, even though Congress said the World War II incarceration was unconstitutional. So these images are images, when you go into the show, you're going to see them, and they have 2 dates on them. So this is called Toby, and it says 2002/2019. So what this was originally photographed and printed in 2002, and then re-photographed and printed in 2019. This is a barrack from Minidoka, where my family was there. And you probably can't see it on the screen now, but if you go into the exhibition, you can see that there's the name Toby that has been carved into this board. And I can only imagine, the parents being upset with this kid doing this kind of permanent graffiti, right? Inside their very small home that they're trying to make as welcome and warm as possible. And here the kid has carved his name in there for us to read today. I included this one in the talk because I think it's really important, given all of the military context that we have currently. This is called Mr. Shoji's son. And I don't know if you can read it, but it says, seashells sent to Mr. Koji from his soldier son in New Guinea. So I can unpack this quite a bit, given just that little bit of information. So the person who's holding this little box with the shell in it is a gentleman who grew up in Twin Falls, Idaho, and who had workers on his father's farm, had workers from the incarceration camp working the farm. And one of those workers, Mr. Koji, gave this shell to them as a gift. So if Mr. Koji was incarcerated, his son probably was, his son either volunteered or was drafted out of the incarceration camp. And his son must have known Japanese. So he was a second generation person, but knew enough Japanese to be in a more of a translator or Secret Service kind of role. The reason I know that is because Japanese Americans were put into segregated units and they were all sent to Europe. None of them were sent to Asia, or other parts of the world. So if this soldier was there, he must have had this language skill, or he must have been in the MIS. So let's see here. And then of course I had to bring this image in today because thinking about the children that are separated from their folks and then incarcerated and then sent out to temporary homes, either through the foster system or in juvenile homes. And this is an image from Jerry Ogata's last resting place. It is actually a new headstone, but every time I've been to Manzanar, this was taken at Manzanar, there are new offerings for baby Jerry. This time here in 1999, there was a heart that was made out of barbed wire. I'm assuming it was something from the camp that someone picked up and made a heart and left it for baby Jerry. So, clearly I'm thinking about current issues, but also, what had happened there at the incarceration camp itself. Well, that kind of leads me to the billboard pieces. And I know there's one that's in the gallery right now. This is not that particular image. This is child imprisonment from the Never Again Is Now billboards that I did for Four Freedoms. This little girl is Yukiko Okinaga Hayakawa, and she's waiting in Los Angeles at Union Station to be sent to Manzanar Relocation Center. She's sitting on top of a bunch of canvas bags that her family has hastily kind of thrown their clothing in, and she's tagged. Everyone was tagged with the number of their family so that they could be corresponded to each other as well as their belongings. This is the image that you have in the gallery now, although it's not this specific piece of vinyl. This is Irene and Hiroshi. They're both children actually at Minidoka incarceration camp. They're 4 and 2 years old, or 1.5 years old. And you can see the barracks behind them in the camp, and really including this concept of never again is now at the sites of the camps and in southern Idaho was really important to me. When I was asked to do the billboards by Four Freedoms, I was thinking about never again is now, that slogan, but I couldn't figure out how, what I wanted to put on it, because I thought of billboards as being this space where commerce happens, right? And advertising. And I didn't know how to massage that, right, into something that could be art or something that could be, excuse me, let me silence my phone. To transform that into something that had a deeper cultural meaning. And so as I was wrestling with it, I realized that a billboard was just a giant photograph that was inserted, into the landscape. And so with this one, I asked, hey, can we do one in Southern Idaho? And they were like, sure. They were doing billboards in all 50 states. They didn't have anyone yet for Idaho. So I said, that's me. And I wanted to insert this image from the camp back into the landscape and say never again is now. So this is in a 2-lane highway in southern Idaho. And I'm putting these 2 children and those barracks kind of back into that landscape. So this was 2018. Four Freedoms also did another project this year in 2021 during Asian American Pacific Islander Awareness Month, which was May. And it came 2 months after the Atlanta spa shootings, which really affected me greatly because of the way in which the victims of the shooter were objectified by both the shooter and by the police, kind of them empathizing with him more than the people that were killed by saying he had a really bad day, or, these women were temptations for him rather than human beings, right? So the idea of we belong is something that I really wanted to convey. And I didn't want to say they belong. I wanted to say we belong, to put the focus back on the individuals and on my community. Just saying, hey, I see you. I see this is really difficult right now, and we belong here. I'm a 4th generation American myself. I mean, like, I belong here, you belong here, we belong here. So this is a historic image of a little boy who's dressed up like a cowboy, because a lot of little boys do that. And it's actually from, I would say, the mid 50s, or mid to late 50s. I did another one, and these were up in Columbus, I should say, Columbus, Ohio, using a historic image of this little girl. And this image was taken in the late 30s or early 40s. And this little girl is standing with her lunch bag with her hand over her heart, saying the Pledge of Allegiance on her before she goes into school in the morning. And again, saying we belong. She is a 2nd generation American, so was born in the United States. And I also, around 2018, I did this piece, and I thought it was just a one-off kind of piece, but it really started to come back to me after the Atlanta shootings. And I did this fortune cookie, and it says unlucky numbers 2, 19, 42. So February 19th, 1942 is the date that President Theodore Roosevelt, or not, I'm sorry, Franklin D. Roosevelt signed the executive order to incarcerate all people of Japanese ancestry, regardless of citizenship, regardless of age. So that was my unlucky number. Many people said, why fortune cookies? Aren't those Chinese, right? And actually, fortune cookies are totally American. Prior to the war, there were many cookie companies in the Bay Area of California where they were making these cookies that are very sweet, a little, I'm sorry, my studio is right by a police and fire station. So looks like something's going on here. I hope you can't hear that too much. But so these cookie factories had to sell their businesses when they were incarcerated. They did not know, the incarceration was indefinite. So they had to sell their businesses and very cheaply, very quickly. And in some cases, some Chinese American families purchased those cookie factories. And so this recipe for fortune cookies actually is very similar to a Japanese style cookie that's just a flat disc. And the Chinese families that purchased these decided to change the shape of them and folded them over. And this fortune was inserted into the cookie. And that, became kind of, it became a tool for them to bring, non-Chinese folks into their businesses. So it was because of the kind of mystique that Asian culture has had of, fortunes and mysticism and the lucky numbers. So we started to see these fortune cookies pop up. They're very American. I lived in China before, and no one has Chinese cookies or fortune cookies in China. This is truly an American invention, and it came out of the trauma that Japanese Americans had to endure during World War II. So I created this in 2018, and then after the Atlanta shooting, I made another one with the date of the Atlanta shooting, which was March 16th, 2021. And so it really came full circle, right? And I was thinking about how many, there are so many instances of anti-Asian hate. How many are there? Do I need to do a series of these? And so I started researching. And of course, there were too many to do, so I had to limit my research to only people who had passed away. So if it was just an attack or a building burnt down or something of that nature, I didn't include it in my list. And then once I had a fairly decent list of deaths from racialized hate crimes, I started the series. And I have another one here for you. This is the Vincent Chin's murder. It was June 19th in 1982. I also learned a lot about anti-Asian hate that I didn't know, that I was never taught in school. For example, during the gold rush and when the train stations were being built, there were many massacres of Chinese workers. I did a fortune cookie for the Rock Springs Massacre, which happened in 1885, where 28 Chinese workers were killed. This happened like 5 or 6 times in the history books that I could find. So I don't know. Hopefully this isn't going to be a project that continues, but the idea is that you would get a fortune cookie and you would open it up and you would see your unlucky number, and then on the back of it, it would give you the event that happened so that you could learn a little bit about the history of our country. Right. And I think I either talked really fast or I misjudged how much I needed to include in the talk here, but I'm really happy to take questions. I have my social here. I am on Twitter with the same handle as well. However, I don't go on Twitter very often. And then of course my website is there and you can feel free to peruse that as well.
Thank you, Emily. So are there any questions from anyone here in the auditorium? Nope. Are there any online? Kyle, is there anyone on the Zoom?
There actually is 14 folks on the Zoom.
I see. So we do have a question by Sarah Clements, and she's asking, can you talk about your camera? Like what type of equipment do you use?
Sure, I should have talked about that when I talked about these prints. So the camera is a Hasselblad, and if you're a camera nerd, you'll know it's a medium format camera. It has a Leica lens, and it has this really specific, actually, let me get to really specific markings you can see here on the left for its negatives. So you always know someone's shooting with a Hasselblad if you see these little marks there. And I printed them full frame so that you actually could see the borders of the negatives. So here is the border of the first print, right? The negative on the first print. And then the black border here is of the second negative and the second print. That's an excellent question. Sarah, are you a photographer?
Well, we know that she is. She
Oh,
might have
okay.
responded, I'm not sure, but yes, yes. Are there any other questions? Are the billboards still up?
The billboards are not still up. The one in Idaho that was this image that was kind of on its way down to Idaho. This is actually an image from Cincinnati where I live. This was right off of the highway, and then they put this up in Idaho as well, and that one stayed up for a good year until someone purchased, something else to put up there. These ones in Columbus that were put up this year, they're not still up. They were this company, Orange Media, is working with For Freedoms specifically on locations that have new digital billboards. And if there's a space open, then they would allow For Freedoms to use it for free. So, because it's a nonprofit.
Okay. Any other questions?
Looks like.
So, Emily, I had a question for you. Out of the images that you have in the show, is there one that speaks to you the most? I know that you had already pointed out a couple, the one with the cup and the barbed wire, but when you returned to them, was there one not only that spoke to you, more than the others, but maybe the same one or a different one where you discovered something new in rephotographing them? So it's kind of two questions, I guess.
Yeah. I wish I'm gonna put this up here so I can see some of the images. I think, well, the physical culture image, I think is pretty poignant. I mean, I already had a kind of a healthy respect for the objects that were left. So that is an interesting story. The physical culture image was taken in the basement of a hotel in Seattle. It's called the Panama Hotel, and it was at the time owned by a Japanese family. And Japanese Americans were not able to, well, I should say first generation Japanese Americans were not able to own land. You had to be a citizen, you had to be born in the United States. There was no naturalization for people coming from Asia at that time. So if you had a child that was old enough to purchase property, you could do that. And the folks who owned the Panama Hotel did that. And they had this hotel, and they started telling people that you can store your stuff in our basement because we don't know what's going to happen, and our hotel will just be sitting here. So they put a lot of things down there. And then after the war, not everyone came to pick up their items. A lot of people didn't come back to Seattle. Maybe they relocated somewhere else. Like my grandmother actually ended up getting out and going to New York City. And then she met my grandfather, and they moved to Hawaii, where they got married. But when I see that physical culture, and I think there's this white appearing woman jumping up in joy, right? And someone saved that. Someone decided, of all the things that I'm going to pack up and store here, this is really important to me, and I'm going to save this. I start thinking about who that might be. Perhaps it's a little like a teenager or somebody who saved up to buy that magazine. It's like a fashion magazine or something. I was just trying to figure out what was in that made people, made someone want to save it. And I guess that has added some meaning, thinking about, the folks that are coming up here from Mexico and South America, and thinking of them leaving everything, and wondering what they're keeping or what they can possibly bring with them. Yeah. Sorry, that was such a long answer.
No, it was great. Are there any other questions on Zoom, Kyle, in the chat? Okay. Well, thank you, Emily, again. And if there are any students in the audience or on Zoom that are in my classes, the code word to get credit on Blackboard is going to be Emily. But we have a reception following the talk that we have food over there now. So if you have not seen the show, or if you want to go take a look again, now that you've heard Emily give her talk, we do have some refreshments in the gallery. Hope to see you over there, and we will talk to you soon, Emily. Thank you again.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Should I hang up now? I'm sorry.
So, but I'll be in touch. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye.